Hello there. My name is Martin Entz. I'm a professor in plant science at the University of Manitoba, and I'm here at the Glenlea Long-term crop rotation study. And so what we want to do today is to take a look at the plots and talk a little bit about some of the developments here at the long-term study just south of Winnipeg, Manitoba. So one of the features of the Glenlea rotation that I want to start off with today is the clubhouse. Glenlea is a very windy place, and when it rains, there's mosquitoes. So we like to entertain our guests here in the veranda of the clubhouse. I wanted to feature the clubhouse because it's been here since 2008, but the rotation itself has been here since 1992, and this year we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the long-term rotation here at Glenlea. Okay, so let's begin the field tour, and I'm standing in front of the prairie. And the prairie is a very good symbol for us to take a moment and acknowledge the communities that made a living in these areas, that lived on these lands before European settlement. The Indigenous population and the Métis communities. And in fact, we are on a Métis river lot right here. So that's one of the things that I like about the prairie. I come here, I look at it, and it gives me a chance to reflect on the history of this place and the fact that we are all treaty people. The other reason we have this prairie is as a benchmark, and we seeded native grasses into here in 30 years ago now, and it doesn't maybe look as impressive now as it will in 6 weeks when the big blue stem grows nice and tall and is nice and green. Here's a few remnants from last year. But it's an excellent place to compare our agricultural systems to. So we ask the question, will the soil health in our agricultural systems be as good as the health in this prairie? Finally, we can use this prairie to measure how the changing environment is being reflected in things like the soil. So when we started the Glenlea study 30 years ago, the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere was 360 parts per million. Today, it is 419. And that's really what is a concern for the climate emergency that we're trying to address. But the prairie is very useful because we can understand how the changes in atmospheric carbon affect the carbon in the soil, and how the changes in the temperature regimes affect the carbon in the soil. So here's the first stop today, July 6th, 2021, the prairie. Final point on the prairie. We are getting some invasion of sweet clover. We are getting some invasion of legumes into this prairie, and that's not unusual because the prairie is, we don't have a lot of natural nitrogen fixers in here. So the prairie has changed a lot over the 30 years, and one of the trends we're seeing now is some encroachment of legumes. So here we are in front of one of the plots, and these are some of the conventional rotations, and I'm joined by Sarah Wilcott. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about what your role is here at Glenlea.
So I'm a research technician, and I work on the long-term studies. So the Glenlea is our longest study at the U of M. So I spend a lot of time working on the plots here.
Tell us what we're looking at, and maybe we could take a look at each of the crops in this particular rotation. So what's over on this side? And I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
So this is the conventional grain-only rotation. So this rotation, we have soybeans, which is here on the left, and then we have wheat, flax, and oats in the rotation. So every year, it's a fully phased rotation, so each crop is grown every year, and then they move to the next plot.
What do you think about the growth of the crops? What have the growing conditions been like here this year?
So I'm sure most people are aware that this year has been pretty challenging. It's been very dry and very hot, but luckily for us, I guess, sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse, that the soil here is very clay rich. It's very heavy clay. So there actually, when we seeded, was still a decent amount of moisture, and we seeded quite deep. So we were actually able to get pretty good growth so far.
Did you do, what kind of soil management did you do before you seeded these crops?
So in the conventional rotation, we try to do no-till as much as possible. So yeah, in this rotation here, we didn't till anything before we seeded, which works pretty well. It worked good because the moisture was quite good for the seed bed, but there was also a lot of residue from the surrounding cornfields that we had this year blow into the plots. So that was a challenge. Our drill is not technically a no-till drill, but it did work. It did work pretty well.
Okay, thanks a lot. So these are the conventional grain-only plots, and the rotation here is wheat, and then flax, and then oats, and then soybean. All right. Which of the crops that are growing here? Let's go take a look at the flax. Of the crops, we've seen the soybean, we've seen the wheat. We're now looking at the flax, and you can see the flax, and those are the oats. So, of these four crops, which do you think look the best this year?
The soybeans are looking the best this year. Everything germinated pretty well, and we got pretty good establishment at the beginning of the year, but the dry weather and the heat just really stunted the growth of most of the crops. But the soybeans seem to be doing the best, and hopefully we'll get a bit of rain and we'll get a decent crop.
I'm struck by how short the wheat is, so it clearly shows that it's dry. And what variety of wheat are you growing here?
In the conventional, we have the Cardale wheat, and in the organic, we seeded an organically developed wheat.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you've got a different wheat. So we'll look forward to seeing that organically developed wheat when we look at the organic plots. Okay, thanks a lot. So those are the conventional plots. Great. We can look at the wheat. It's nice and clean. The edges are bigger, taller, but that's because they're picking up water from the alleyways. And if we look into the crop, we can see a lot of drought stress, and the crop is quite short. This is Cardale wheat, and I wanted to show you the conventional Cardale wheat. You can see some significant desiccation of the lower leaves due to drought. Okay, so here we are at another one of our conventional rotations in the study, and Sarah is going to explain what the rotation is here.
Yeah, so this rotation, the perennial rotation, it's a wheat, flax, and then 2 years of alfalfa. So you can see, again, a fully phased rotation. So we have wheat, flax, first year of alfalfa, a second year of alfalfa, in this rotation.
Okay, so we're standing in front of the alfalfa plot here. It actually looks really good. It was harvested already this year? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So one of the questions that comes up is, how can adding alfalfa into a conventionally managed rotation affect the need to fertilize your crop with nitrogen? Could you tell us a little bit about how nitrogen is managed here versus the grain-only rotation?
Yeah, so this year for the wheat, in the grain-only rotation, we use about 60 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, and then for this rotation we only needed about 30. So it's usually about 50% less nitrogen required in this rotation.
Okay, so the 50% less nitrogen requirement, is that based on a soil test then that you do?
Yes.
Okay, and when do you do that soil test?
Typically we do it in the fall, but if we don't have time, it can also be done in the spring before we seed, before anything happens.
Okay. And so let's take a look at this wheat here. It looks it doesn't look quite as short as the wheat in the grain-only conventional rotation. How would you characterize the look of this crop versus the one where you don't have alfalfa in the rotation?
Yeah, it definitely looks a bit taller. Yeah, all the crops are pretty short this year because of the conditions, but yeah, I would say this rotation typically has a bit nicer looking crops in the wheat. For sure.
Okay. It also looks to me a little darker greener. Yeah, you would agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a reflection of more nitrogen, and nitrogen being mineralized out of the organic matter from the breakdown of the alfalfa. One of the things that we didn't talk about in the annual rotation is, it looks to me like you've got some weeds there that were actually not controlled with herbicides. Is that true? Could you tell us what weeds those are?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of thistle in the grain-only rotation, and that is pretty difficult to control with herbicides, especially the ones that we can apply in crop. So it does knock them down, but it doesn't get rid of them completely. But it doesn't seem, there's not as much thistle in this crop here in the perennial.
Oh, okay, so the alfalfa is doing what the textbook tells us it can do, and that's to help control thistles. I think you're right. Now, I think over there we also have wild oats that are resistant to herbicides, right? And do you see that same problem here?
No, the wild oats are definitely better controlled in this rotation.
Okay, so what we've done then is we've compared the grain-only conventional. Here's another conventional rotation that has the alfalfa in the rotation. I just want to make a point that people often say, well, alfalfa is a problem because it has to be fed to livestock, and so it's not really practical for my farm. It's really interesting for people to know that alfalfa is also starting to be used as a protein crop for humans. So it's harvested, the protein is extracted from the leaves, and it goes into human usable protein products. So this rotation, when we started it in 1992, I should say, we were really only thinking about alfalfa as an animal feed, and now we're thinking of alfalfa as a crop that can be used to make, meat substitute burgers, for example. So, thanks. So here we have the grain-only organic rotation in one of the other replicates. And we are looking at the flax, obviously, and you can see that this organic flax actually looks quite clean, and it's quite remarkable this year. If we walk through the flax, we can see it's quite weed-free, and the portion that I just walked through is the part of the plot that has a history of hairy vetch as the green manure, and then this subplot that we're looking at here is the flax 2 years after alfalfa breaking, where we put the alfalfa phase in, and it shows the power of the alfalfa in this organic rotation. So we're very proud of this flax this year. We don't often see our organic flax looking quite this good. Okay, so we're in the grain-only organic rotation, right? We've looked at the flax, and we'll look at the green manure crop in a minute. But here we're in front of the wheat, obviously, and I'm looking at my plot plan here, and maybe you could explain what's going on here with these wheat plots.
Sure. So the previous, what was previously seeded here on this half was the hairy vetch and barley green manure, and then the back half was the alfalfa that had been in for 5 years. And yeah.
Okay, the one thing that I'm noticing here is some wild oats, and we don't see a lot of wild oats where the alfalfa was. So again, like that other rotation that we looked at, would you say that short-term alfalfa here controlled the wild oats?
Yeah, for sure.
Them?
Yeah, so suppresses them definitely. It's always a pretty big problem in the organic rotation. the grain-only rotation is the wild oats for sure, yeah.
Right, so the organic grain-only rotation suffers from wild oats, and that's one of the reasons why we put the alfalfa in, to kind of stabilize that, right? Yeah. Here we have the wheat and the organic grain-only system, and in the foreground, you can see the crop is much taller than in the background, and I'll explain in a minute. Now, this is not Cardale. This is an organically bred variety. And as I go through, you can see a little bit of smut in the field. And smut is a problem in organic production, and there are ways of dealing with it. We have smut here because it got into our grain cleaning system, unfortunately. But if we look at the crop, you can see there's some smut right there. You can see this crop is not as drought stressed as the conventional. I don't know if that's because of the variety or because of the cropping system. Now, the land on which the wheat is being grown here was in hairy vetch barley last year. So it's our standard green manure system. This has never had any alfalfa in the rotation. And as we walk to the edge of that plot into the next part of our plot, we can see the wheat is much shorter. It's more drought stressed. And although not bad, but this is where we had the alfalfa in the rotation for 5 years. And I think what we're seeing here is excess, the alfalfa used more water than the hairy vetch, and so in this drought year it's causing us to have a smaller crop, but still nice and clean, very nice looking crop. And I'm going to walk to the end and then turn around, and we can see the crops from the other angle looking west. This is actually quite amazing when you think that this is the 30th organic crop on this piece of land.
We're in front of the green manure plot. So in the organic system, this is in place of the soybeans, which is in the conventional system. So this is our nitrogen fixing year. So if you come down, this is a mix of hairy vetch and barley. So we can see this is our hairy vetch plant here. And then when the barley grows a bit more, we'll roller crimp it, and that will kill the barley, and then the hairy vetch will continue to grow until the fall or until the winter when it freezes, and then we will plant wheat next year.
Okay, so we're standing in front of another rotation here. Sarah, maybe you could tell us what we're looking at.
Yep, this is our perennial organic rotation. So it's flax, 2 years of alfalfa, and then wheat, which we're standing in front of here. And then in this organic system, we split the plots and apply half manure to half of the plot.
Okay, so I've got my handy plot plan here, and it's telling me that the back half has received nutrients in the form of manure.
Yes.
So now things have become pretty exciting around here because we've changed the type of manure that we're adding. Could you tell our loyal viewing audience what we're using these days to enrich the crop?
Yeah, so last fall we applied a mixture of compost manure, anaerobic digestate, and an insect frass.
Okay, so that's pretty exciting. So we're using a combination of livestock manure and manure from the food waste stream. Okay, yeah. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're excited to see how it goes.
Okay, so thank you, and thank you for paying attention to learning about our crop rotations at Glenlea in 2021. I'd like to just share with you some of the other things that are happening at Glenlea this year. Behind me is an undergraduate student project where students who take the organic crop production course have a chance to design a cropping system. And so this particular student has decided to grow a crop of wheat and flax together. So it's a wheat-flax intercrop. And so Glenlea provides a great opportunity, for students to practice, to learn something about organic production, and in fact we're expanding the use of Glenlea for this kind of student education. So here we have an intercrop of flax and wheat, and the student will harvest it and try to separate the grains and learn about the system. And if we move the camera just down here, every student has just a few passes with the seeder, and over behind me is just a crop of plain wheat, and this is another student who decided just to grow an organic wheat crop. And the students have been pretty impressed with how well the crops grow, how clean they are. Unfortunately, of course, because of the drought, they're very, very short. So thanks for joining us on our impromptu tour of the Glenlea Long-term crop rotation study. As I mentioned, it's 2021. It's the 30th year that we've run this rotation. We had hoped for maybe better growing conditions, a little bit more rain, so our crops could maybe look a little bit more vigorous, but that's the thing about farming. You take and grow a crop the best you can in the circumstances that you're given. So I wanted to just end by thanking all those people who have worked on this rotation over the last 30 years. We've had a number of research technicians. You've met Sarah, but there's others who've spent a lot of hours working on this rotation, a lot of summer students and graduate students. And we've had the financial support of all kinds of agencies. The Manitoba government, through many different programs, they don't always know that they've supported this program, but they have. And I'm sitting on our beautiful 1630 John Deere tractor, we have help even keeping it going, and it got a complete rebuild last year, and you're probably admiring how fresh the paint looks. And so I'd like to acknowledge all those people who have assisted with this rotation. It's been so much fun. And if you want to learn what's happened in this rotation over the years, you can contact us anytime. There's a website that Sarah Wilcott has constructed, and it's live, and the site will be given at the end of this video. You can visit the site, learn more about the data that's been generated off this study, and it gives you links to further information. So I wish everyone a safe post-COVID 2021. Let's all get vaccinated and stay healthy. Thank you very much.